Hi, I'm Alison Pepperell and I chair the Charities Special Interest Group for the Institute of Risk Management. The Special Interest Group is really keen on encouraging charities of all sizes to think about risk management, and this is our first recording of our Getting Started campaign. And with me today is Rebecca Bowery, who is the main author of this programme. Rebecca?
Hi, yes, I'm Rebecca. I've been involved in risk management for the last 12 years in some capacity, and I've worked in the charity sector for the last 4 years, and currently with Diabetes UK as Head of Planning and Performance.
And today we're launching our straightforward anti-jargon leaflet and guidance, which is available from the website. And it's part of our plan to do a series on various risk management subjects, which will all be supported by similar slide narrations. Today's webinar will give you an overview of what risk management is all about and how important it is within the context of successful strategic planning. So let's get started. So there's already a lot of risk theory and guidance out there, lots and lots. What's different about this guidance, Rebecca?
Well, as you say, Alison, yes, there is lots and lots. And when I was first asked to set up a risk function a few years ago, I had to wade through through these mountains of it and try and penetrate the jargon. But what struck me was that most of it seemed to be targeted at the big corporate organisations who have teams of risk professionals, and the guidance seemed to be full of what I needed to do, but not how I might go about it. And now that I'm in the charity sector, I'm responsible for several different areas, and I just don't have the time to wade through all of this mountains of paper to try to see how it's relevant to me and my organisation. And I must say, I often feel like the chap in this picture, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I think that what we need is something that cuts through all the theory and sets out step by step what we need to do to get started with risk management. And it needs to be easy to read, so even if we've only got a few minutes to spare, we can grasp the essentials. So we thought really carefully about the presentation of our leaflet and guide, and I hope that it will help charities on the road to successful risk management.
And who do you see the guidance as being aimed at?
Well, I think it has several audiences. I think perhaps some of the smaller charities who really haven't yet got to grips with risk management should be able to sort of benefit from it and get started, as the leaflet is entitled. But I think it can be used much more widely than that. After all, people across the organisation will be involved in identifying and managing risks, and I think it can be used to issue to all staff who might have some involvement in risk management, so that the process can be embedded across the organisation.
Yeah, it also occurs to me that trustees would benefit from it, whether the organisation's big or small, because they might not be as familiar with risk as we perhaps think they are.
I think that's true. I think we probably assume that trustees know everything about everything, but I'm sure that that's not the case. And yes, I hope that they would be able to get something from the leaflet and guidance too.
Great. So what is risk management? Let's have a look at some definitions so we're all clear what we're talking about. So Rebecca, risk is a word that's used a lot in general conversation now. But what does it really mean in this context?
Well, as we've said here, we try to set things out quite simply. It's something that might or might not happen, but if it does, it would affect your objectives in some way. But what I find is that it can often be confused with an issue, which is something different. An issue is something that you probably didn't plan but has already happened and now needs some action to be taken, so that the effect on your objectives is minimised. And perhaps I can give an example of what we mean by both of these things. So when we were planning this meeting today, to record this session, I said to you, well, Alison, the weather forecast says there might be some snow. That means that my trains might be late, and I therefore might be late for the meeting. So that was something yesterday we didn't know for sure. We just knew that it could happen. But if I had contacted you today to say, I'm sorry, it has snowed, the trains aren't running, so I can't make the meeting, then that would be an issue. It would be something that has now happened, and we would need to take some action to make sure that our objective to record this training session went ahead in some way or another.
So then risk management is the undertaking of any activity to identify and then control the level of risks faced by objectives. The process we're going to talk about applies to all types of risks, so you can use it for your organisation as a whole, for complex projects, simple projects, anything and everything. The process should obviously be tailored for the type of work that you do, and you know your risks best. So when we come to look at the risk management framework in a future session, it's definitely worth your while thinking, how does this fit into the context of my own organisation? So now let's think about why we need to undertake risk management and the way that risk management can actually help you in your day-to-day job. We've already said it's about helping you to achieve your objectives more successfully. It's also about protecting your funds and assets and maintaining trust and confidence from stakeholders. Some of the benefits of that include increased certainty. So if you know what your risks are and you've managed them, you can be certain of it. So you'll have fewer unwanted surprises. Obviously, even good risk management isn't perfect, so there'll be times when you do need a good contingency plan in place because you can't think of anything and everything. It should hopefully mean that you can provide better service delivery to your stakeholders, customers, service users, whoever it is that you're working for. And you're more likely to stay within budget, create less waste, and hopefully also minimise your risk to fraud. It will definitely improve decision making because you've thought about what might happen and looked at different scenarios, and you will be seen as an effective organisation and one that learns from mistakes when they're made. But Rebecca, you've also said in the literature that there are benefits for individuals as well. Can you explain what you mean?
Well, I think if we're managing our risks well, we'll be spending less time running around from one crisis to another. So we'll be less stressed, and we should be able to have a better work-life balance, which to me sounds like a good thing. And if you're seen to be calm and in control, it's probably more likely that people will want to come and work for you, which I think is probably a good thing to consider in the charity sector where turnover can be quite high. But there's a little quote that I found that sums it all up quite nicely for me. A little risk management saves a lot of fan cleaning.
Yes, so in essence, it's actually about successful strategic planning. It definitely shouldn't be a one-off checklist because that's not going to help anyone. It needs to be embedded and become second nature within the organisation. It's just a case of finding a way to do it once you're sold on the concept of risk management and you understand how much it can help you. So having said there is a lot of guidance out there, we're going to put one piece of guidance up on the screen. This is the ISO 31000 guidance, ISO standing for International Standard, which means it's recognised across the world. So you can use this whether you're a UK-based charity or an INGO. This diagram sets out the process, which is actually quite a straightforward one. And our guidance will go on to explain what's involved at each stage. But before we move on to that, Rebecca, who would you say needs to be involved within risk management in an organisation?
I think that's a very good question. Very often there is someone with risk management somewhere in their title, and it's assumed that they will take care of everything. But actually, I think we all have some responsibility. So to give an example there, I think the people who are actually delivering a service are the best ones, are the ones best placed to spot whether there are potential problems, and they should make sure that they tell their line manager as soon as they can, not just assume that they will already know or that somebody else has reported it. But having said that everybody has some sort of responsibility, it is of course good practice to have someone who coordinates risk management activity across the charity, and we'll look a little bit more at how you might go about doing that in a future session.
So Rebecca, we've boiled this all down to 5 key steps which seem quite straightforward, and we'll explore them in more detail in a future session, I know. But what are the key messages you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, there are quite a few. Firstly, you need to be very clear about what it is you're trying to achieve, so your objectives. People often ask me to help them identify risks, but and the first thing that I'll ask them is, okay, what are your objectives? And quite often, worryingly so, the answer is, well, we're not really sure, we've just been told to do it. But we've said that risks affect your objectives, so if you don't know what your objectives are, you can't know what your risks will be. Then secondly, just check that the risks you've identified really would affect your objectives. So think of it this way. The weather forecast might say that there's a 50% risk of rain tomorrow. Now, that only matters if your objective is to hold a barbecue in your garden. But if you're planning a day in front of the television and you're not venturing out at all, then really it doesn't matter whether it's going to rain or not. Then thirdly, I think just remember that you don't need to leap into action on every risk. There may be some lower level risks that have got perhaps a low likelihood of happening and wouldn't have too much of an impact if they did, where you might want to just keep an eye on things. And then of course there'll be others that are potentially very serious, and you'll be wanting to do everything you can to prevent the risk occurring. But I often find that people, regardless of the risk score, and again we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later, regardless of how serious the risk is, people have a habit of trying to think of everything that could be done to stop every risk occurring, and it just isn't necessary. Some are more important than others. Then next, and this one is really important, you really must monitor and review your risks. I find very often that people get to sort of stage 3 and stop. They have a beautiful risk register with lots of identified risks and lots of action planned, but that alone won't make the risks go away. You need to take that action, and you need to check that everything is going okay. And the other thing you need to think about is that as time goes on, there will be new risks too, and you need to think about those.
Yeah, that's very true, and it's not a living, breathing document unless you do that monitor and review. The last point, communication and reporting to the right people, is again really important. And the more conferences I go to about risk, the more I realise the importance of communication. And you have to think about your audience, just like when you're presenting on anything. If you're reporting to senior management and the board in particular, they don't want to wade through 164 risks. They want to know immediately on 1 page, 2 at the most, what the key risks are, and perhaps more importantly, what you're doing to minimise those key risks. We will cover communications again in a future webinar, and it will be a single webinar because of the importance of that section. So that's it for today, and I hope it's given you a flavour of what risk management is all about and why it's important that charities get to grips with it. We're already working on our next webinar, which will be on the subject of risk assessment, and which we will be putting on the website very shortly. So thank you for listening.